And so let's do a quick discussion on aggregation pipelines in MongoDB. Now there's one problem in this lab that requires you to build an aggregation pipeline with your query. And I will say that this is something that is also in the class in the future. And so, I guess, I always like to talk about why. Why is this important, and like when do you need to use these? And so there's kind of 4 scenarios here that I have outlined. If you're thinking about large sets of data stored in a Mongo database, when do you want to use, or when is there a need to use this aggregation pipeline before we even talk about what it is, right? So in general, like the most general way I can think of it is when you have complex queries that you need to write. When things get more complex than just pulling out, simple like less than or greater than, or when the person's name is equal to this, like those are more simple queries. So like the first thing I would say is like more complex queries, that's generally when I find myself needing aggregation pipeline. But that just general concept of like, hey, when it gets a little bit more complex, that's not in the weeds enough. So I wanted to get a little bit deeper and talk about, hey, when you need to do data transformation, we're going to see what it means to kind of transform your data throughout these multiple stages. What you're going to find out about an aggregation pipeline is that there's stages, and you need to kind of reshape your data throughout these stages. And so when we get into filtering, grouping, or projecting. Now, let's talk about filtering. I mean, so this is very real world, right? You go to Amazon, you search for a product, and you want to filter, right? So there's a very real world situation where you want to filter your results if you need to filter, or you want to group by a certain category. And so you're searching for video games and you want to group by all these sports video games. So you want to group by what's the average price of a sports video game. That's a very real world scenario where you might use aggregation. Again, that's a more complex query where you're grouping all these documents together based on the category of sports, and you want to find like an average price. So again, grouping or summarization. Again, you're summarizing data across multiple documents. So we kind of talked about grouping here already. And then you get into functions like counting. Well, how many video games are there that are a sports category? So you're getting a count, or you're adding all of their sold, how many sold video games are there with a. So you're summing, right? You're summing, you're averaging, mining minimum or maximum values, right? So when you're doing these things like filtering and grouping, then based on those groups, you're summing values, you're averaging values. Joins. Now, we talk about Mongo database, and we have many less joins. And really a goal in Mongo is to not have a join. Right? Ideally in Mongo, data that is accessed together is stored together. So really in many cases you don't want to have joins, but that doesn't mean they're never needed. So if you need to do a join, you have the ability to do so with an aggregate pipeline, as well as sorting. So here's all these very real world things when we're talking about filtering results, we're talking about grouping results, we're talking about sorting results. Well, again, Amazon search, sort by cheapest, sort by whatever, right? You're always sorting results. Yeah.
Would you mind sharing the screen?
Yeah. Okay, so that's why aggregation pipelines are important, because there's some very real world functionality that if you want to implement that functionality on your website, you're going to need aggregation pipelines in the back end on your database. I think the term is a little bit intimidating, and frankly, these are more advanced queries, so there's a little bit of a learning curve. However, an easy way to picture what an aggregation pipeline is to picture an old school assembly line, right? Everyone can kind of picture the first assembly line was, I believe, Ford, right? They were making the Model Ts, is that right? A couple people nod their head, right? And what would they do? They'd have an assembly of, stage one. They take the parts and they assemble some of it together, right? They transform the car at stage one, then they pass it on to stage two. People do other assembly and transformation of the product at stage two. And then they pass it on to stage three. So if you think of an assembly line as a grouping of stages, and each stage they're kind of building a product, and at the end of the result, you're getting a different product. So the data is kind of being transformed in the output of the stage, but it's also kind of one directional, right? You're going to start with stage one, you're going to go then to stage two, you're going to go then to stage three. So if you understand assembly lines, and you can kind of picture an assembly line or a conveyor belt and transformation happening at each stage, you understand the basics of an aggregation pipeline. Okay, so even though this is more advanced queries, and I personally tend to think it's a little intimidating, if you understand those concepts, you'll begin to understand this. Okay, so an aggregation pipeline consists of one or more stages to process documents. Documents are your data. Each stage performs an operation on the documents. For example, a stage can filter, group documents, and calculate values. So any stage you can do filters, grouping, or calculations. Documents are output from one stage and passed to the next stage. Again, we talked about that with the relevance of the assembly line. An aggregation pipeline can return results of groups of documents. Again, I just think of like, hey, you're searching for video games that are sports video games, you're grouping by the category, and then you want to find out the average price of a sports video game in your system. So the syntax here is pretty similar to what we've done so far. You're going to say db dot the name of your collection, so like db dot book dot aggregate. Now the aggregate function, if you kind of look at the example, they have a orders collection and they have a bunch of order documents. Okay, so imagine this database. This database has an orders collection, and you can see that there's different orders of pizza. And so when we look at the query itself, db.orders.aggregate, the first thing they do is they only want the records. Essentially, you want to filter your records with the match. And so if you think of the match stage as a filtering, this is filtering out only the documents, again, match is filter, that are size of medium. So if I go up to my data set, we have a size, right? We have a size of small, we have a size of medium, we have a size of large. Okay, so we're going to filter out our records that are only size medium. That's stage one. So by the way, this aggregate, notice the argument that you pass to this method is an array. It's an array of what? It's an array of objects, and each one of these objects is a stage. So pretty simple syntax. You have an array of objects, and each object is a stage where you can transform the data. Okay, so you can kind of see here what's going on. The match stage filters to the size of medium and then passes the remaining documents to the group stage. Okay, now one thing that's going to help you build these, and this will help you with this lab assignment, okay, because it's kind of hard to just write all of this at once especially as a beginner. And granted, these are only 2 stages, and they can be much more complex than just 2 stages. Okay, I want to show everyone a tool. So go ahead and watch my screen share. Everyone take a look. Okay, everyone take a look. Okay, now what I'm going to do is kind of back up. I'm going to go to my databases, and I'm going to browse my collections. And I'm just going to use their sample data set because, frankly, that's maybe we can do this real quick. And then I'll go ahead and create a database, and database name is pizza orders, and there will be an orders collection, and all that's fine. Okay, so now we have our order collection, and I need to run an insert many command. So since we learned how to do this, let me go ahead and go into my command prompt, and let me seed this data that they've given us. So let me go back here, let me click on connect, let me go to shell, let me copy this connection string in right here along with my password. Let me pause this while I copy and paste my password. Okay, paste my password. Okay, and we're connected. If I show DBs, we could see our pizza orders, so I'm going to use pizza orders. And now I'll run this insert many command, db.orders. And I might need to, like I did last time, no, that looks like I'm able to paste that in without error. So let's go ahead and hit enter, and there my records are inserted. So if I do show collections, and I do db.orders.find, you can see that my documents are inserted. Okay. Let me take it back out here. Now that I've got the data put in, let's browse collections. And here's the tool I want to show you that I think is pretty cool. So if I click on pizza orders, and I click on the orders collection, okay, notice there's an aggregation tab right here. So I'm going to click on aggregation, and this is kind of a builder, if you will, of an aggregation pipeline. Okay, so this is a stage by stage. It'll build a stage, and then it'll essentially, if this is a assembly line, it'll show you what your data looks like at the end of the first stage. Okay, so there's only 8 documents in this collection, and right now it says your pipeline is empty. To get started, add the first stage. So here I click that button, okay, and if I scroll down, I see stage 1. So again, they kind of have the answer here of we're going to do a $ match, and I haven't done this since last summer, so I believe I just type in $ match, and now I'm going to have to get the syntax right for this. I'll just copy this. Now again, the fact that it's not giving me the IntelliSense, I wonder if I do that. And this, when I get this right, it says stage operator is required. So maybe you don't put the document to object here. Oh, let's do this. Okay, there we go. Again, it's been a while since I've done it, but here is these are the operations that you can perform inside of an aggregate pipeline. So there should be a match here, and it tells you what they are, right? So this is just a very useful tool. Again, you got to get used to the syntax and how to work with it. But a $ match filters the document, so let's select that. And it kind of puts in the query, so let's just do size : medium. And I'm not sure if it's a capital M, looks like lowercase. And this would then be the result. You could see the output after the match is a sample of 3, and if I zoom out, there it goes. Here's a sample of 3 documents, 1, 2, 3. So what I like about this is you can kind of go stage by stage and see how the data is actually being transformed at each stage. Not the craziest thing when you only have 2 stages as they do here. But here's an example. Now, are there only 3 mediums? If I count 1, 2, and 3. Let's go ahead and just change this to size of small. Large. Okay, so 2 larges, 3 mediums, and 3 small. Okay, so now we've got 3 documents, and we need to add another stage. So this would be stage 1, right? Pretty easy. We add a match, add a stage. Well, what can you do? I think this is also useful for looking at the operations that can occur. And there next is a group. So let's go to $group. Groups documents by an expression. So the ID is going to be what we're naming this group. In my example, it was like sports video games, right? So underscore ID colon and then in quotes I'll even keep a capital I, just medium pizzas. We're going to group them by so we're essentially kind of making when we're grouping, again, we got 3 pizzas. We're going to group them together. We're going to call them medium pizzas, and then we're going to sum their quantity, right? So again, we're performing a sum operation and calling the accumulator. So this is sum $sum. Oop, total quantity. Sorry. Call it sum. Sum total quantity. That's fine. And then in here, $sum, the field of quantity. Now, $name. Hold on. $sum property is summing the quantity field. Now there is a quantity field. Does my data set have quantity? I'm not seeing my quantity. Oh, there's quantity. There's quantity. Okay, good. So let's copy, make sure I got that spelt out right. When all else fails, let's just $group. Again, sorry, let me get the syntax. Hold on, let me get the syntax. Okay, had to get my syntax right, and that just required me paying closer attention. So, what's going on here? At this stage, we're grouping fields by their name. Again, kind of going back here, there's a name field, right? So we're grouping them by their pepperoni. Again, in the category I gave, it was like sports, video games. There's pepperoni, there's a cheese, and there's vegan, right? So these are different names of our types of groups, right? So we're grouping them by their name value. So $, anytime you see $, that's a variable. So that's why it's creating the underscore ID of cheese, and then we're running a sum operation on the quantity field, right? So $sum is a function, and then $quantity, this is a field up here that every record has a quantity. So apologize for the syntactical mistake. Again, there's so much more that you can do with this, but you know, I at least wanted to expose you guys to this tool. I find it can be helpful in building this out. Now this is done, right? So this query, let's export it to a language, and here it gives you the Mongo shell query, right? So if I copy this, right, this is Mongo shell, should be able to go back into here, clear the screen, db orders dot aggregate, to kind of go back to, is it aggregate or aggregation? I'm thinking aggregation.
It's aggregate.
Aggregate, okay, thank you. So let's say aggregate. Paste that in. Now it does interestingly highlight, it doesn't like my comments, but actually, okay, it didn't cause any error. So the data set I get back was the results that I built out in my builder. Okay, so that I think will be what you need to get a start on number 9. Again, we're just being introduced to this pipeline here. We will continue to use it throughout this course. Let me make sure that's what you need to get a start on the lab. If there's anything else I need to tell you about. So you will use $group, that is a stage. You will use the group stage. There's a sort stage, and there's a limit stage. So for number 9, the 3 stages you will use, and you can write this down, the 3 stages you will use for number 9 is group first, then sort, then limit. Okay, so those are the 3 stages that'll help you out on your lab. Yep.
Number 10.
Okay, hold on. All right. Any other questions on number 9?